Hi, this is Ann V. Brady. I'm going to be discussing several things in my book, A New Beginning, the story of my adoption, life, and service. I wanted to discuss the fact that the perception of some people, mostly men, of adoptees, adoption, and women, uh, not necessarily in that order. When I was in college, I went out with a young man named Bill S. And one day when we were talking, I was looking at him to see, I was thinking of myself if I wanted to marry him or not. And no, I wasn't looking to get married at the time. I was in college and I wanted to finish college, but I was looking at him as a prospective husband material. And so one day on a date, I mentioned that, you know, if I ever got married, I might consider adopting a child. Well, Bill went on a rant. He said, well, if a woman has a child out of wedlock, she should take care of her mistake. I looked at him and I said, I'm adopted. And he was like, you know, if I had thought about it at the time, I probably would have said, and what about the father who helped her make the child that she's giving up for adoption? She didn't get pregnant by herself. And I later occasionally went on dates with him as a third wheel. But I met him, he introduced me to his friend. We're in the Young Adults Club together, Joe. Now, Joe was a great guy, but I had several problems with him. One was the fact that he always wanted to, he never pushed back against me. If I said something he didn't like, or if he wanted to do something, he would always ask me, and it's like, whatever you want. And whatever I did was wonderful. And while that's lovely, if you don't ever have pushback against you on certain things or actions that you do, or some minor disagreement, I'm not talking about knockout brawl fight, but disagreements or whatever, if everything's always hunky dory, there's something wrong, because not everything you do or that I would do or he would do would be perfect or wonderful. And to pretend so is just an illusion. But anyway, we had brought Bill along on this date, and first thing that bothered me was that Bill looked at me, and now I dated him before I dated Joe, his friend, said, how does it feel to be going out with a man, the first man you've never slept with? And I thought that was odd, considering I never slept with Bill. So why would he say that? Well, when I was talking with Joe, he made the comment, how does it feel to be going out with the only guy you've never slept with? And at first I laughed, and I thought about it, and I said, did you talk to Bill at all tonight? He said, no, why do you ask? You know, but then I looked at him and I said, you know, that's not funny. I said, it's disrespect to me, or words to that effect. Uh, you're assuming that I run around and sleep with guys, you know. And I said, I'm a virgin. No, I didn't advertise it. I don't think it's anybody's business if I am or not. But if you're going to tell me that you're the only guy I've never slept with, and I've never slept with you or anybody else, and I've only dated 3 guys in my life, and you're the third guy, you know, that bothered me. And when I joined the military after college, now, when I was in high school, I was against the war, and yes, both brothers served, one in active reserves, the other went to NAM. He was in the Army Rangers as an officer. And I supported my brothers, but I was against the war. I didn't believe it was right. Uh, I didn't think we should be in Vietnam. If you had told me I was going to join the Army or any military organization, I would have laughed you out. I would have said, you're kidding, right? But when I got out of college, I couldn't afford, well, I was looking for a job, and because I had switched majors to biology and medical technology, a BS in that, Bachelor of Science degree in that, and I couldn't get an internship in a hospital because my college, Delphi University, lost its affiliation with any hospital, so I had a book of hospitals that was handed to me that I could contact to try and get an internship. But if your college is not affiliated, you're at the bottom of the list when they're looking for people for internships. And that's a fact. And back in the 70s, in this late 1978, when I graduated from college, that basically you had to have 3 to 5 years experience and or certification as a medical technologist. And so I didn't have either. And so looking for a job, I applied for different jobs. I even applied to Revlon in the microbiology department to check, make sure that there wasn't bacteria in makeup and everything. And I wasn't getting a job. And so it was really getting on my nerves. And my mother suggested, well, why don't you let us pave the way? We know people in certain hospitals that, we could get you a job. And I told her flat out no. If I'm to get a job, it's because I'm good enough. I have to get it on my own merit. I don't want a handout. She said, well, you'd get the job because of us, but you would keep it by earning it. And I said, no, that's not the way. So I joined the military and took basic at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. In basic, when we were doing our live round exercises, uh, where we actually had the M16 and we're using actual bullets, we had training exercises where we had blanks. And the last exercise was actual live rounds. And so we would, somebody would on one side would run up and conceal themselves behind cover and yell cover, and we would say, moving or something like that. It's been a long time. Uh, and we would cover them, and then we would alternate, and it was like a leapfrog type situation. I'm on the right side, he's on the left side, and then I would run up and say, moving, and he would yell, cover, and I would move, and then we'd go forward like that. Well, with the live fire, they paired me with this guy who hated women in the military. He felt we didn't belong. And he was a recruit just like me. He wasn't a drill sergeant or anything like that. He was just a regular P nothing private. Uh, so he complained that I tried to shoot him. And I said, well, if I tried to shoot you, I wouldn't have missed. He said, well, you only got marksman. You got 50% of your. I looked at him and said, that's because I followed my brother's advice and shot right-handed instead of left-handed, and I shoot a lot better left-handed than I do right-handed. Fast forward to when I was stationed at Fort Gordon, Georgia, which was my second post after Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And Ed and I had gotten married. I was working in the clinic instead of the Department of Clinical Investigations. I had transferred over. Uh, I had the sergeant, Sergeant H, who was new to us. He had transferred in from Germany. And and he was a nice guy, or at least he seemed to be. And one day I come back from lunch, I walk into the lab to do my urinalysis. I brought my specimens. He walks in after me, and he's standing with his butt on the counter looking at me. I finally looked at him and said, "Can I help you?" And he looked at me and said, "No, just looking." And I was like, "What the hell?" And that kind of ticked me off. Uh, then, after Ed and I lost our daughter, she was stillborn at 9 months. Angela Kathleen is what we named her. Uh, he came up to me one day and he said, "You know, didn't you tell me that your husband used to use drugs and that's why your daughter died?" I looked at him and was like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I've never discussed anything about my husband or anything like that. You have me confused with somebody else because I never told you anything like that. Because most of the time I never really talked to him." I did talk to my friend Joyce later on and tell her what he said. And I said, "You need to be careful what you tell this man because this is what he said to me. And who knows what else he's airing of yours, or he's telling people that he may be attributing." Now, this is a guy that like was married and had 3 children, according to my friend Joyce, and that he liked women. I could see that because he had a habit of finding someone whose spouse who was married and their spouse was somewhere else, had been uh, situated or sent somewhere else, ordered somewhere else, and posted somewhere else uh, in the army. And because they don't want married couples in the same unit, and if they don't have the job, just the person's MOS, military occupational system, uh, they're at the post they're both at, one of them has to move. And he would go up to the women whose husbands had been posted elsewhere and talk to them and be there listening and, "Oh my, he's probably cheating on you," and blah, 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 blah. And so, but that was the type of person he was. But also, when after we left our daughter, first of all, I could only take 4 weeks instead of 6 weeks because the doctor told me unless I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks, they would only give me 4 weeks because I didn't have a baby to take care of. First of all, that's not why the 6 weeks was given. It was given so that you could get back in shape so that when time came for the PT test, you could pass it along with taking care of the baby. But I refused that, so I only got 4 weeks. When I came back, the temporary sergeant major, because the sergeant major was on TDY, told me I had to work in the bleeding room or phlebotomy room drawing blood. And I was fine until I got back to work. And then it kind of hit me because everybody's asked me about the baby. I'm having to explain that the baby died. Uh, but what was bad was I told them, couldn't I just work in the urinalysis lab because I was upset. And he said, well, then you shouldn't have come back. You should have taken the 6 weeks. And that bothered me. And then during that time, a sergeant came up to me, and he was in charge underneath the sergeant major, but he was in charge of scheduling everyone for which area of the lab they worked in, also for going to the different wards to draw blood from patients. So he told me I was going to be drawing blood from newborn infants. And I looked at him and I said, you know, I just had a daughter stillborn, and you want me to go up and draw blood from newborn babies? He said, oh, I didn't think about that. Well, you can go up to the maternity ward and draw from the mothers. And it's like, man, you're clueless. But I went and did it, but it was tough. And when the sergeant major finally came back, I complained to him about all that stuff and about Sergeant H. He told me, well, boys will be boys. And it's like, that's not what I was looking for. But he did talk to the one sergeant that insisted I draw blood, even though I was worried about how I would react because I was nervous about doing it because the emotions. But I survived and I did it. But unfortunately, there are some people in the military, there are some women too, but mostly men, and not all men, that view women as either sex objects or someone to go after to see if they can score points. And now I've had, when I was stationed towards the end of my career at Fort Rucker, I had a sergeant who came up to me and said, you know, uh, you've changed my mind about women in the military. He said, my old unit, the women got treated differently. They were given more lenient. They didn't work hard, and they used their being female to get away with stuff and get easier assignments and not have to work at night. He said, but you're different. He said, you lead, but you also work with us. You don't order us. You give us orders, but then you work side by side with us. And he said, I've never seen that with a woman in the military before. And it could have just been the way, the unit that he worked with. But I had a sergeant, female sergeant Kay, who was upset with me because when our first sergeant didn't think of me at first to be on a promotion board or to lead a promotion board, because I had been on a promotion board and asked questions of a candidate. Uh, but he was going to put me in charge of it. And he put someone else in charge, a male. And then he came back to me and said, I'm sorry, if you want this. I thought of him first. I wasn't thinking, forgive me. But if you want to be on it, and I told him, no, I'm fine. But I heard her afterwards telling this other female in front of the EO people that came to talk to her that I was naive and didn't know what sexual harassment was. I know exactly what sexual harassment was, and what they thought was the sexual harassment really wasn't. And they had this illusion, and it was like they were looking for sexual harassment under every rock. And so, you can't assume anything about anyone, and you shouldn't. You need to take people, unless you know they're liars, at face value, that they are what they say and that they know what they know. But Overall, my experience in the military was wonderful. I met a lot of different people, and some of them were actually from other countries. And I've met people from Jamaica, Haiti, you know, and there's a lot of camaraderie in the military. And people, for the most part, unless they're racist or misogynist, think, you know, take when they're exposed to different races and nationalities, discover we're all basically, yes, we're different, but in the main ways, we're all alike. We may look different and have different styles of the way we work, but when it comes down to it, we're working, we're doing our best, and we're surviving just like everyone else. We're married, we have kids, or we're single, looking for someone, but we do our jobs, we try to get promoted, you know, and so the differences are, to me, minuscule. And seeing everyone work and being exposed to different types of people and different nationalities, someone other than that's not like you, whether you're black and you're exposed to white people more, or vice versa, you get a broader view, and I think it expands your mind, and hopefully you become more tolerant of others because you have a new perspective about what other people are like, and that they're more like that we are more alike than we're not. But basically, that, and when I was stationed at William Beaumont Army Medical Center, I had a sergeant. Now, I worked in Department of Clinical Investigations, but I was doing a research project in a pediatric clinic. And one of the male soldiers there was upset because a female sergeant got promoted and he didn't. And he was railing about the fact that women never served in Vietnam. And I didn't say anything, I just let him rant on. But the thing is, yes, women did serve in Vietnam. They served in Korea. They may not have been on the front lines, but they served in support roles, combat support roles, as nurses, medics, you know, they were, or even, you know, personnel and financial. So to say that they didn't serve is a crock. Women have served in almost every military battle that we have had or may have happened over in Europe and stuff. Like I said, not necessarily on the front lines, but nurses, doctors, personnel, finance, women work in those fields, and they have worked in those fields. In the Civil War, there are some women that disguised themselves as men so they could fight. Others were nurses. They were more than that. They were prostitutes who would go into the camps and service the soldiers, but they would also treat wounds and take care of their medical needs, you know, and eventually someone came along like Clara Barton and made an actual profession and educated women as nurses, just like Florence Nightingale over in Europe. So don't judge people. We're more alike than we are different. And hopefully we should all get along. Y'all have a nice weekend, and bye.